Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever looked up a movie or a TV show, seen that really high critic score, got all excited, and then you watch it and you're just completely let down? Well, today we're going to dig into why that happens and take a look at the sometimes baffling world of media criticism. You know that feeling, right? You see the score, but then you read the review, and the words seem to be telling a completely different story. So what is actually going on when the numbers and the review just don't seem to line up? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to look at a really fascinating case study. It's a Doctor Who spinoff called The War Between Land and Sea. Now, look at these numbers. The critics gave it a 75% fresh rating, but the audience way down at 45%. That's a 30-point difference. I mean, that is a massive gap that really makes you wonder. So let's really dig into this confusing reception. What on earth could be causing such a huge divide between the professional critics and the regular viewers? Let's take a look at the data. Okay, so the core idea here is that the big number you see at the top of the page, that aggregate score, it might be hiding the real story. To find out what's really going on, we have to basically become detectives and look at the actual evidence, the words the critics wrote. All right, let's dive into this. We're going to put the scores right next to quotes from the very same reviews, and, well, this is where things start to get really interesting. First up, we've got a review from The Times. They gave the show a very strong 8 out of 10. You'd expect some glowing praise for a score that high, right? But look at what they actually wrote. It calls the show a well-meaning lecture with pious sanctimony. I mean, does that sound like an 8 out of 10 to you? That language feels more like it belongs with a 4 or a 5. And it doesn't stop there. Here's another one, this time from Digital Spy. The score is a 6 out of 10, which is, technically fresh, a passing grade. But the description uses words like awkward and clunky. It's hardly a ringing endorsement, yet it contributes to that overall positive critic score. And one more for good measure from The Guardian, also a 6 out of 10. It literally starts with, "Look, it's fine," and calls it solid entertainment for kids. It even says teenagers might start off sneering at it. Again, the praise is so faint for a score that's officially classified as positive. Yeah, you can definitely see a pattern emerging here. So, we've seen the what, this weird disconnect between the words and the numbers. Now, let's get to the why. What's the theory behind all of this? The first part of the explanation really comes down to the mechanics of the scoring system itself, especially on a site like Rotten Tomatoes. See, a show gets a fresh rating if a critic gives it at least a 6 out of 10. That final percentage you see isn't an average of all the scores. It's just the percentage of critics who gave it a 6 or higher. And here is the huge implication of that. A review that calls a show a masterpiece and gives it a perfect 10 out of 10 is weighed exactly the same as one that calls it fine, I guess, and gives it a 6. They both just become another tick in the fresh column. This can totally flatten all the nuance and make a show seem way more beloved than it actually is. Now, the second part of the theory is something called the access media theory. Here's how it's supposed to work. A critic writes a review that's pretty honest, maybe even critical, so they keep their credibility with their audience. But they still assign a passing score of 6 out of 10. That review now counts as fresh. The theory suggests this helps them stay in the good graces of the studios that provide access to early screenings and interviews. It's a pretty fascinating, if a little cynical, theory on how the industry might work. So, all of this really brings up a much bigger question, right? It's a question of credibility. If the scores can be this misleading, what does that mean for how we trust criticism in the first place? So here's the crucial point, the bottom line. You have these two things happening at once. A scoring system that turns everything into a simple thumbs up or thumbs down, combined with these potential industry pressures. The argument is that together they can create a real credibility gap, where the scores you see just don't reflect what the critics truly think. And honestly, this quote just perfectly captures the whole argument and that feeling of confusion. After reading through all the lukewarm, even kind of negative reviews, the conclusion was that it just doesn't seem like any of the reviewers actually liked the show. And yet, the top critic's score was a staggering 80% fresh. Which leaves us with this final thought. In an age where we're all looking at these quick scores and percentages, maybe the biggest takeaway is to look past the number. After all, if the words in a review tell a completely different story from the score, which one should you believe? It's definitely something to think about next time you're trying to decide what to watch.